we are going to be working on my 300 horsepower supercharged 4-seat mini jet boat here. Now, I tore this thing up last weekend. I crashed it about 5 or 6 times into trees and it's beat up. But we're not gonna worry about that because we have far less important things to worry about, like building a bunch of custom one-off, overly elaborate, complicated parts for it, because that's what I like to do, so that's what we're gonna do. So that being said, the first part we're gonna tackle is this intake situation. I've got a bit of unfinished business here and I want to try to resolve it. So this being a supercharged engine with a gear-driven supercharger, the whine with an open filter is insane. It is ear-piercingly loud. This thing sounds like a Hellcat demon ripping down the road, except on the water. It is wild, which at times can be cool, but at times can be really, really tiring to listen to. So to fix that, I decided to build this air filter enclosure situation to quiet it down. It eliminated it entirely. So in that sense, it worked perfect. However, seemed like it wasn't as peppy with this intake on it. Seemed like this might be a little too restrictive. And I confirmed that by going out and testing that versus the open air filter, and the difference was pretty dramatic. It was only about 3 miles an hour up top, 3 to 4, but that down low grunt, that punch when you hit it, that puts you back in your seat, that's where it was a really dramatic difference. So naturally, being a car guy, like power, speed and power, you know, we went back to the open air filter, but I think there's a way that we can do this to where we don't lose any power, but we do eliminate the noise. We got half the equation right. I really want to see if we can get the other half right and have our cake and eat it too. Not to mention, I have an idea to do it in a way where we can easily switch back and forth between the two, because there's times when I'm sliding around the back river ripping it that I want to hear that supercharger whine. There's times when I'm going 10, 15 miles down the main river where I don't want to. So to be able to easily switch back and forth between noise or no noise would be really nice. And I've got a plan, I've got the parts, the pieces, the bits to do this, and I think it's gonna work. So that is what we're gonna get into first. Now, that being said, I mentioned that I thrashed this thing. I finally have my own battle scars on this thing from tearing it up, and ones that aren't silly ones, like me running into a tree I thought I could fit under with my windshield open. And that is from this last weekend. We had a wild ride, and I only brought one camera with one battery because I wasn't planning on filming it, putting it in a video or anything like that, but it was so unexpectedly wild. We ended up going down this back creek that doesn't even register on the maps. We were so deep into the woods, running across some woods people. It was wild. And as I mentioned, I crashed a lot. We got stuck a lot. I was not prepared for how chaotic it was gonna be, and it was just an absolute blast of a time doing this with 6 mini jet boats. And I put together some little short form content that kind of went semi-viral. So I thought for those of you who haven't seen that, I've got to show you some of what went down this last weekend and how we got a bunch of new battle scars on this thing before we get to what we're really here for, which is building the cool custom one-off parts. So yeah, let's flash back a week and then we'll get to work, I promise. go. Just hoping we get to clean water. There it is. Oh no.
We are ready. We stopped at a courtesy.
Where's the mini jet?
Oh, in the back. You made it.
How the heck do you make it over here?
So the first half of this creek was like a straight toge road, dodging trees, all of that, but there was no seagrass at the bottom. This whole second half, just under the water level, is this grass, and your jet drive sucks that grass up and it clogs up the jet drive inlet. You get no water flow, which means you get no coolant, the engine's getting hot, and you got no propulsion. And what ends up happening is, since you have no propulsion, you stop. And if you stop, then you're really in that grass and you can't get back up on plane, because as soon as you try to, you suck the grass up yet again. So it is a vicious cycle. And we finally started heading back and made our way to what we thought was the end of it. We're out of it. You tired? They came for you. Did you find them?
They were stuck in the grass. I passed them. I said I'm not stopping.
Oh, the irony. This was over. Oh no. Yeah, now we're going the right way. Oh God. Shit. Johnny, look out! No! Almost made it, dude. So after getting out and pushing the boat to a spot that I thought was deep enough for me to get back on plane again, I decided I just gotta send it and try my best to not come off plane through the rest of this. But I may have sent it a little too hard. That was a log that I jumped sideways. Not really how you jump logs. So on this intake, basically going with the same premise, but we're really changing everything. Everything's going to be larger, everything is going to be different, and it's all different. Really, the only constant is the fact that the filter is going to be in a box, which should cut down or eliminate on the high-pitched whine. So to do that, we have a ton of stuff. We've got larger piping. We've got even larger piping. We've got clamps. We've got adapters, reducers. We've even got something to give us a different cool noise, since we're going to be eliminating some of the cool noise. All in all, it should be a drastic improvement over I'm not sure if this is going to work, so I'm going to do it the quick and easy way intake we did last time. So that being said, I don't know if you can tell, but I'm excited for this one. One, it's kind of a redemption on the way I did it last time, since we did get half the equation right. We were close, you know? But also, I just love this stuff. This is like my favorite thing to do, is building custom one-off stuff. So I got the blueprint in my head. I've got a pretty solid, rough plan. I'm sure we'll run into some complications. We'll have to jump some hurdles, but I think we can do this. I think we're going to tick all the boxes on this one now that we've had a first try at it. So that being said, I'm not going to get anything done unless I quit jibber jabbering and we get to work. So let's get to it. So the first step was to determine exactly how large we can make this box and where it's going to go roughly. Obviously, we want to make it as large as possible, but it's still got to fit in here and not be too much of a pain and take up too much space or get in the way of other things. There's a lot to plan around and build around. So after putting some different piping up there, getting an idea of bin radiuses, we could start cutting out the main shape of our box. Now, I would like to be using a little bit thicker aluminum for this, but this is the sheet that I have, so this is what we're going to use. We're going to make it work. So I started marking out all the dimensions for my box, and then I'm going to cut it out of the main sheet with this circular saw. You can use generally kind of a wood instrument, a wood cutting instrument on aluminum because it's so soft. So this is just a regular wood circular saw with a carbide tip blade, and it cuts through it no problem. Not to say it's not chaotic. It is pretty loud and ear piercing, but hey, it gets the job done. So basically, we've got 4 bins to do here because we need a little lip on the top and the bottom. And this is the one downside to my press brake, is when you start getting bins close together, it starts to get a little tricky. In this last bend, I'm not sure if we're going to be able to bend it without deforming it, and unfortunately it did get a little tight. But after wrangling it out of the bender, it looks like we've got a pretty uniform box. It would be better if it didn't get bound up, but it's good enough for us and what we're going for here. So now it's time to make the end caps. So we're making this in effectively 3 total pieces plus the lid. So I went ahead and measured and then started marking out all of my lines for that. Now, it is absolutely critical to get your lines and everything right. It's all the time you put in on the front side will save you time in the long run. So again, we use the circular saw to cut the piece off of the large sheet that we can't fit in the bandsaw, and then I'm doing my precise final cuts in the bandsaw because it's just a lot cleaner and a lot easier to cut exactly what I want to cut and not what I don't want to cut. Now, these are going to get a bend too, so I went ahead and kind of pre-notched them so that way everything should fit together like a bit of a puzzle piece. Since we started with kind of a scrap area on that sheet, we don't have the straightest lines. You know, where we cut, it's okay, but where some old cuts were, not so great. So we got to spend some time on the belt grinder and try to straighten all these lines out, round the corners off so everything fits together nicely, and then try to get our bends absolutely spot on. And this is definitely the trickiest part. You know, when you're using a bender to build something, it makes life way easier. It's way less welds, it's way less pieces, but the tricky part is those bends, you've got to get them just right. You've got to account for the height of the bend with the thickness of the material. There's a lot going on there. So They're pretty close to fitting as is, but we've got to do some massaging to get them to fit perfect. And then it's time to go ahead and make our holes. We're going to do this while these are separate pieces because it'll be a lot easier than trying to do it with an entire box that's welded together. So I marked our center, and we've only got a 3.5-inch hole saw, which for the 3.5-inch piping is totally fine. We just had to clean it up a little bit with the carbide burr, open it up a touch, so that way the piping slides in easily and we have some misalignment if we need it to make it work and get everything lined up. However, with the 4-inch, we've got to burr it out a lot. And if you've ever used the carbide burr, you know that it's tricky to go exactly where you want it. You basically become a human milling machine, you know, and trying to get it just right and not dig in too deep, it's tricky, especially trying to get a nice round hole like this with a tight fit up like we want. So I've got it to where the 4-inch goes in there, but not like I'd want it to. We got some gaps, but that's a problem for a future tailor who has to weld that on. He can deal with the gaps. So now it's time to fit up the box and get everything tacked together, make sure it's all square and uniform and it's all going to work before we weld it out. So this is another tricky part of fabricating, especially something like aluminum, is you can't use any magnets. So you've got to get a little creative in how to hold pieces in place while you tack them. And then once you get them tacked, you know, it's pretty simple and straightforward from there. So putting a bunch of tacks on this because aluminum does like to pop tacks. I've almost never had steel pop a tack, but I've had aluminum, especially big pieces like this, pop tacks all the time. So now that we've got a million tacks on there, we're just going to weld it out. So I made sure to take the time to clean everything with acetone. That's a step that sometimes I'll skip because it's already hot and I'm already started and I'm already ready to go, and it makes for a much better weld and a much better finished product. It's just one extra step you've got to remember to take. The box is complete. I would have liked to use a little bit thicker material than this. This stuff just gets real warpy, but this was what I had a large enough sheet of to do it out of. But we got the box. That's step one. So we need to mount the box and then build from A to B, which is the box, and then B to C, which is out of the box. Out of the box. You ever see that show as a kid? All right, let's get this thing mounted up. See, it is a little bit tight in here. So as much as I would love to shove this thing back as far as I can under this cowl, we can't. It's got to hang forward to clear everything that's in there, and it is a little bit tricky to mount things to this cowl because with the engine cover there, you can't really get to it. So I couldn't mark through the holes. I had to mark in front of them and then transfer those marks, which is not ideal. This is something I've talked about before, but the better you can mark your holes, the better your life is going to be. And it's something I used to be terrible at, and I've gotten a lot better at it over the years. And this is one of those times where I don't really trust my marks, which means we're probably going to have to do some work on the end. But we're going to go ahead and get these rib nuts in. I've got these nicer ones. I used to use the cheap ones, and these grab a lot better. I trust them a lot more. So unfortunately, because we transferred our marks, we didn't perfectly mark through the hole, it doesn't line up. We've got a little bit of offset, and that means we got to break out the carbide burr and oblong these holes. Now, this is one thing, our saving grace is that we have a carbide burr. If we had to just keep drilling these holes larger and larger to get a little more to one side, we'd end up with a massive hole. But all we've got to do is slot them the direction we need them to go. All right, we just need to make sure that the engine cover closes with these bolts and with this, but it should close with the box itself. I'm not worried about that. Mainly just if we can use the hex head bolts. Nice. All right, cool. Take a gander. I've got a plan, trust me. So from here, we could start with either side we want. We could start with the intake into the box, or from the box into the engine. And I decided to start with going into the engine because that is going to be the trickier spot. So we need a super short 3-inch piece. We could have just reused the old pipe that was there, but you know, we've got new aluminum. I've got a bead roller. We might as well make a shiny bright piece. So this is all brand new stuff. It's hard to reuse old stuff unless you absolutely have to when you're mixing in a bunch of brand new stuff. So we got that piece all cleaned up, and then we're going from 3-inch to 3.5-inch. So I decided to use this quick seal clamp in between. That way we have some more flexibility for misalignment, and it should make our lives easier when it comes to installing and removing the box. We hopefully won't have to do it very often, but at least if we do, it'll be simple. So I wanted to go ahead and get those welded up because there's really nothing that's going to change there. Because they both rotate, they don't have to line up a specific way because they can line up anyway. So this is where it gets tricky. We've got to go from A to B. We've got to figure out a combination of bends that gets us into the box square, so the filter sits in there nice and level, gets out of the box and attaches to that 3.5-inch reducer, which really, that was kind of an extra complication for us because it adds a lot of length. And the more length you have mandatory stacked in there, the less room you have to make your bends, you know, and get everything to line up correctly. So this is tight quarters, and we're going to have to get really creative here, I think, to come up with a solution that makes everything fit together correctly. This material is junk. Well, I was trying to avoid having to use this donut, but if it does fit perfect, it was worth it. I was really hoping this donut would be the answer to all of our problems, but it still wasn't looking quite right. It still wasn't lining up exactly like I wanted. This is a really complex combination of bends that we need because the hole into the box is a little forward from where the 90 elbow is for the inlet to the supercharger, and then it's got to go down. So it's got to go kind of a spiral, if you will. It's got to go back and then back forward and down and around at the same time. And again, you've got to keep in mind that we need to have this perfectly lined up in the box. So fortunately, the scrap piece from a bend that I had tried ended up being kind of perfect to get that last bit of angle that I needed to make all of this fit correctly. So we're going to take our win and we're going to go ahead and just tack all of this up. I used to be the type to always wait to tack anything up and just keep it taped together, but there is nothing worse than getting really far into a project and it just falling apart because you got it taped together. So again, we're going to take the win. We're going to tack this piece up. One of the harder puzzles I've had to put together, that's for sure. Now that we've got our piece tacked up, we need to determine exactly where it fits in there with kind of the least resistance so that we know where to cut the end of this off for our filter, because the filter can only go so deep. So we need to cut this to the right length that the filter goes on all the way to the wall of the box, but you know, has enough there to hold on to. So with that done and out of the way, it's time to weld it on. I mean, it fits, it ships, we just got to weld it out now. good. Pretty good. That should work. So we got pipe all welded up. We are on to the most critical junction of this entire project. And that is where this bend goes into our box here. Now this is critical because if it's off any little bit up here, it's gonna be off a lot of bit down here. Now fortunately, we have that extra range of motion in our back pocket to use it and make everything hook back up. So it's pretty good right now. I think I'm gonna go ahead and send it and weld this out. If we can nail this, we're doing all right. Alright, well, this is going to be a little tricky to weld because we got some big gaps, but we work with what we got. I'm going to blame Fit Up Taylor for this one. So part of the reason that we use that quick seal clamp is to give us some misalignment at the bottom in case things don't fit after we weld them, and you can see how much things move around as you're welding them, which is why we don't just start and go 360 degrees around. We weld it a little bit at the front, it started to pull down, then we weld a little bit at the back, it starts to pull up, and then we can kind of connect those dots to try to minimize the warpage, because again, a little bit at the box is a lot where it attaches. Alright, well, that's all welded up. Let's test fit it back in there, see if it still fits. Well, fits mint. Let's see how the filter fits in here. Oh, perfection. It's like just the right amount of stick out in there for the filter to go on all the way. Beautiful. Oh, it's so satisfying. I love this stuff. I live for this. But yeah, that's pretty much exactly what I was going for. As you can see, we got the open top and the filter. Next up is going to be the inlet to the box. So we stepped up to 3.5 inch here, and we're going to step up even further to 4 inch as it comes into the box. We're gonna add some extraness to it to allow us to kind of adjust how loud we want the supercharger whine to be. And the same's gonna go for the lid here, which is gonna be kind of complex. It could either come out really, really good or really, really bad. So we need to take our time there. But yeah, anyway, let's get the pieces. So I was actually gonna use one of these V-bands going into the box as well, but we had such a short distance to make that curve down that I didn't want to take up any more distance with the V-band, which is why I just welded that on there. But this other side, we are going to do a V-band flange, make it easier to install and remove the box, but also this will allow us to rotate our inlet to the box. So we can point it forward if we want to hear the noise. We can point it back if we want this thing to be as silent as possible. We have options. Okay. Got a plan. Last piece of the puzzle here. Gotta see how this is gonna go on, if I can weld it on or not. So I know this bell mouth is designed for people who are going to, coupler it to the inlet of a turbo or something, but I thought it would weld okay, and boy, was I wrong, man. I mean, one, it's super thin, which that's not a huge problem in and of itself. We can manage that, but just whatever was on this material did not weld well. Gosh, that's gross. I'm gonna have to grind the living snot out of that. Well, the V-bands welded great, but this was about the most disgusting thing I've ever welded. Got it cleaned up enough here to get something okay going on, but then we need to get this welded into the box. Then we can start working on the lid. One step at a time. Let's get back to work. One of the most time-consuming things when it comes to fabricating is just installing and removing things over and over again. But you gotta do it. You gotta do it to make sure everything fits correctly. Now, when I went to weld this on, I realized we didn't need this little 2-inch piece of 4-inch stick out. There's enough room for the clamp to go on if we weld the V-band just by itself into the box. Now, the problem is that means we gotta cut it apart, which wasn't really happening in the bandsaw, so we had to use the old grinder, which I'm not my favorite tool to use, but the side benefit of doing this is, one, it tightens up the packaging, but two, we have basically a wider piece. And that hole being a little extra large, because I went a little crazy with the carbide burr, this actually fits nice in it, whereas the actual 4-inch tubing did not fit very nice in it. There's a lot of gaps. So, you know, kind of a win-win for us. All right. Should be our last bit of welding on the main bits, at least. I need to go find something to make this seal. And I gotta decide, I think I want to do this the way I want to do it. I think it'll be way cooler that way. So in theory, two things should affect how much supercharger wine we get. Thing number one is where this is pointed. If it's pointed at the back, that's going to minimize noise. If it's pointed to the front, that's going to increase the noise. By how much, I'm not that sure. But I think a bit. I think that'll be a noticeable difference. But the larger difference will be whether the air filter's in a box or not. So, since we had to have this lid anyway to be able to put the air filter on and take it off, I thought we might as well make it kind of quick release removable. So, if we're on a backriver rip and we want to hear this thing and make cool noises, we pull the lid off, put it out of the way, we've got an open air filter. If we want it to be quiet, we're cruising a long distance down the river, going out for just a chill ride, whatever the case, put the lid back on, quiets it back down. Now, to make it easily removable, we could bolt it in. But I feel like if there's 4 bolts standing in the way between me and noise, probably not going to want to take them off. Not that it's a big deal, but it's enough. I feel like it's enough to make you not really ever switch back and forth between the two. It's the reality of it. So, magnets. Let's get to it. So the first thing we need to do is prep the box for the lid by grinding down these welds. We need a nice, flat, flush surface. And then it's time to make our lid. Now, I was originally going to use the same material, and I went to mark it out, and I realized I have some thicker stuff that we could use to make the lid nice and solid. Now, I did have a piece large enough that we could have cut this out of, but I had 2 scrap pieces that were almost large enough, and if we just trim them up and fit them both together, weld them together, we've got a nice lid out of some material that, you know, might have taken a while for us to ever get around to using. So, you know, I decided to go the use the scrap material route, because scrap gets buried in your scrap bin, and then sometimes you never use it. So I thought this would be a good opportunity to use some of that scrap, clear out some of the bin that is nearly overflowing. So after getting them fit up together, I went ahead and just welded them out, and I kept them clamped to the table to try to prevent warping. It's probably going to warp, but, you know, we're going to do the best we can. And then it's time to make our brackets for the magnets to hook to, because aluminum is non-ferrous, so it's not magnetic. So we need some steel in there for the magnets to grab onto. So I used this piece of 2-inch flat bar, cut it down the middle, cut it into 4-inch strips, and now we just need to clean up all of our edges, round them off, which is just something I like to do. And then we can bend them and have our little tabs for the magnets to attach to. One of the benefits of using steel here is we can tap them and trust that the bolts are going to hold. We're just using some little M4 bolts. These aren't going to have a ton of load on them, so it should work and prevent us from having to, you know, get in there on the backside with nuts. And I generally prefer blind fasteners, whether it's a rib nut or it's threading something. I don't like to have to get a wrench. I like to have just one tool to take things on and off. So I got the first one mounted at the right depth. I drilled and tapped the cover for the bolts I was going to use, but the problem is the bolts I want to use stick up, and that's not going to work. So I tried to adjust the height, and that didn't seem like it was going to work. So I even resorted to using the wood screws that came with the magnet, so they sit in there flush enough so that we're, you know, getting the full magnet surface grabbing the seal, and that didn't work. All right, well, unfortunately, we're gonna have to pivot on our plan here. I swear, every time I try to really use magnets for something like this, they disappoint me. This is 2 magnets. It just barely holds it on, and then if I... So that's not gonna work. So I have a plan though. All right, so the new plan is to use some quick latches. Now I came up with this idea because I thought I had a whole pack of them, which I do somewhere, but I have the ones we took off the vet's hood here, which will do the trick. The only problem is I only have 3, so thinking 1 at the bottom, 2 at the top. That's my plan. So in an effort to minimize undoing work I already did, I decided to drop them down 1 hole. So now the top hole goes in the bottom hole in the box, which puts them at pretty much exactly the right height. So we can go ahead and just weld up the old holes, so it makes myself feel better about drilling unnecessary holes into this box I just put a bunch of time into. And then we can drill and tap our metal brackets for the quick latch post and get everything installed. Now our mounting location and everything here is super critical. So to transfer the marks to drill the holes for the latches themselves, I just tapped them against the ball point on the post, and now we know exactly where they need to be so that we can drill our holes and make sure that these go in the right spot, because if we put them in the wrong spot, there is no easy way to move them or fix them. So we want to make sure we minimize undoing work we already did, because we just did that. I'd like to not do it again. With the 2 in place and latching on nicely, it's time to mount the 3rd one. Now, I'd love to mount 4. That would definitely be the ideal way to do this, but hey, we're working with what we got. And fortunately, we didn't drill any holes on this side, so we've got a fresh start. So I went ahead and mounted the bracket and then marked where we needed to put our post, drilled and tapped the bracket for the post, and then it's time for the final and most critical hole, the hole for the quick latch itself. And this one's a little tricky because it lands on the weld, but we got it just right to where it fits in there nice and flush. And now it's just a matter of adjusting this to pop on and off nicely. All right, well, we now have a functioning lid. Next, I want to make a little handle, just because why not? These are not the original part of the plan, but honestly, I'm happy with it. I think it worked out better this way. It's more secure. Now, do we need a handle for this lid to function correctly? The answer, absolutely not. Definitely don't need it. But will making a cool, overly complicated, elaborate handle be fun? Absolutely yes, so we might as well. So I took a piece of scrap material, cut the rough shape out of it. If you notice the theme here, I like using scrap material when I can. It's definitely, it's more rewarding, honestly, that way. And now it's time to put some bends in it and turn this flat bar of aluminum into something a little more handily shaped. So we've got a bend and then a bend back, which they're always tricky. We've got them about as tight together as we can get them. And now we need to make our mounting holes. They're going to stick with the same theme and use M4 hardware. Since all this stuff kind of can all use M4 hardware, we might as well use the same, so it's only 1 tool to take it apart. And then that would be enough. We could stop here, but no, we gotta do some speed holes. We gotta make this thing lighter, you know? I mean, this is a jet boat. It's aluminum, and we don't need this handle to be strong, so might as well put some big holes in it and lighten it up some. Now we got a nice, light, snazzy looking handle that we can attach to the lid to make our lives slightly, mildly easier when it comes to removing and installing that lid. So I went ahead and marked my mounting holes, and I was going to tap these, but I just decided to through bolt them with some lock nuts, and I wanted to take the extra step to fully grind off all of the sheen of this aluminum handle, because if you grind on one spot, it's very noticeable. It looks totally different. So I thought we might as well grind the whole thing down so it looks consistent and, you know, just nice and satisfying. And while we were using nuts and having to use a wrench, which I don't like to do, I went ahead and put some nuts on the back side of the brackets to make sure they never come loose. The last step before we can hopefully install this box permanently is to seal it up. It is incredibly important. If we don't have a seal here, air is going to take the path of least resistance, and we're going to hear noise and whistles and whines. So we need to make sure that this seal's tight, and the latches are adjusted so it pulls down snug. Mint. Nice and tight. Sheesh. Pretty happy with that, man. That's looking solid. So here is the filter we used in the original air filter enclosure build. And here is the filter we're using in this one. As you can see, pretty massive size difference there. And enclosure-wise, this was our original enclosure that we built. And this is our version 2. Oh, it's wild, the size difference. And then even just the filter to that filter, pretty massive change. Oh, so satisfying though, man. I really enjoyed that project. I needed a good project like that. You know, this one, I took the easy way out. I realized I had some 5-inch piping and it might be quicker, but I didn't think about the fact that I had to make this bolt-on, so then it got more complicated, and I should have just done this plan from the start. Granted, if I had, I probably wouldn't have gone 4-inch, 3.5-inch. I probably would have thought 3-inch would be fine. So this was a good learning experience. Same with the filter size and everything. This would have all been smaller if we hadn't done this first. So it is a good thing that we took the easy way on V1 so that we could really scale it up for V2. But one more look. It's always satisfying to see your completed fabrication project set up on the bench. Okay, it's time to get this thing installed. Alright, let's see how it is to take off. Got that one, got that one. That one, boom. Want it loud? Just like that. Want it quiet? Just like that. Sits nice and snug. Woo! I'm so happy with that, man. Obviously, it is a rather large box, but that was the goal, to make sure we had plenty of air volume in there. So hopefully this will reduce the noise or eliminate it, with the option to have it and not restrict our power any, but pretty happy with that. So I got it pointed mostly down right now, but yeah, that one was really tough. This whole section here was a lot more challenging than I thought. All right, well, that's done. We'll take it out, we'll see how it is now, without the cover, with that moved around, blah, blah, blah. And then if we're feeling froggy, if we want to do it later, we can add the blow-off valve after the ride. But we're going to go for a ride here soon. I went down the rabbit hole a bit on this project, and it took me a little while to get it done. But now it's done, so we can go test it out. Oh, we got to put this thing back on the trailer. I almost forgot. Let's do that. Oh, 21. Definitely quiet. All right, well, it is way quieter. We did have a mouse sensor code. It seems to have gone away. I think we're good. We're gonna go down the back river now. Rip it around a little bit as is, and then try it without the cover. we made it to our new beach and chill spot. Normally we beach on the main river. The reason is because there's a lot of gators back here. We probably saw 4 or 5 on the way in, and we're not very far in. But the flip side is the water is clear and it's fed from a spring. So the water is much colder than the river water, but not as freezing cold as spring water. So it's like kind of a nice mix where it's like cold enough to refresh you, but not so cold that it's like brutal to get into. So anyway, it's, yeah, you got to worry a little bit about gators. There's a higher gator sighting percentage here, but it's nice. As far as the intake goes, it is quieter, but it is not as quiet as the little intake. But we still have that elbow pointed a little forward. So I want to try it without the front cover, see if it's almost as loud as it was with an open filter. Then I want to try it with the cover with that 90 pointed backwards and basically see what the loudest it can be and the quietest it can be is. But where it is now, I feel like it's kind of exactly what I was hoping for, like a good happy medium where you still hear some whine, but it's not annoyingly, ear-piercingly loud where you don't even want to be in boost because it's so obnoxious. So good in between. Definitely going to throw the blow-off valve on. Kind of wish I had just so we could hear that too. But anyway, just take a listen. All you hear is planes and bugs and gators. It sounds better because it's like the whine's not so overwhelming that you hear like a I'm going to take that off real quick.
Your water level is higher.
Yeah, it's way louder now. Oh, God. Power feels the same. This is the tree I smashed my windshield into. Someone cut the bottom part off. I tried to point it out to you, but you were... I figured you would.
I'm going slow because I think this is where I should ride. Before I was ever. Oops. Guys, I slam harder, or is he gonna turn?
Like that.
A good old quad hit.
Yeah. I was like hoping that I wouldn't have to because I haven't been on here long. Should have brought a ratcheting like 13. I don't think I have any deep sockets. Oh, I did have deep sockets. You got it. I just want to change it back to where it was real quick. It almost seemed louder when it was pointed towards the rear, so my theory was that maybe the intake noise was echoing and amplifying off the hull, because when it's pointed backwards, it's not super far from the hull. So I'm sure there's some point where it's quietest and some point where it's loudest, and we'll just have to tinker with the angle of it some to determine what that is. But it's working. It's doing what we intended to do. It's a lot quieter and less obnoxious, but still sounds cool. So before we headed back to the ramp to get back to work on the boat, we did take a ride down to the main beach spot just to see how this thing did in open water along river cruising, because that's mainly where we're trying to eliminate the noise, and all seemed pretty well. So I decided when I got back, I wanted to throw this blow-off valve on, get some whoosh noises to match our noises that I think we've got going pretty good. So I had to cope it for the 3-inch pipe. It's set up to start at a small pipe, so if you're using a larger pipe, you got to open up that coping a little bit, and then just drill a hole, clean it up, and then we can clean all the material up, tack it on, and weld it out. I mean, this is about as simple and straightforward of a project as it gets, especially compared to, you know, all the creativity we've had to use up until now. Is a nice break. That was the right heat there. See how it's shiny? This was a little too hot. That's why it's kind of dull like that. So with it welded up, I went to go ahead and reinstall it so that we could get the blow-off valve mounted on there, see how it all looks and fits. I was really conflicted on exactly where to mount this blow-off valve for the best aesthetic look and the best noise. However, when I went to plumb it, I found a bit of a problem. Well, we might have to revisit this. The port I was planning on using is this one right there, but I think that has been like epoxied in there. It's not coming out. It can also go here, but mine is closed off there, so I'd have to drill that, which would also require me removing the intake manifold to do it properly and not worry about sending plastic bits through the engine, which would probably be fine, but, you know, prefer not to chance it. So I can't do that right now, which means this is purely aesthetic at the moment, and it'll be a bit before we get to see it in action, because I got to order that kit and knock that out. But that being said, I am very happy with our intake upgrade. Let me know if you have any ideas to quiet it down. I'm thinking the you know, some sort of foam in the box idea, if we want to quiet it down even more. There may be some other ideas. Where it is right now is honestly great. But, you know, I'm always looking to improve things, and it would be nice to have it like really quiet with the lid on and then rowdy with the lid open. That would be ideal. We're not quite there, but it did make a huge difference to make this thing more enjoyable to ride without having to wear headsets, which we also need to get anyway, because they'd be nice to have on certain rides. But whew, that's that. I'm sure this has been a long one with all the ripping and riding and working and fabricating. That was a big fab project, but I really enjoyed it. I can't wait till we get started on the next big car build where I can do all the fab projects. That's my absolute favorite thing to do. It's probably tied with driving, to be honest with you. So, been having a blast with this thing. I love it. This boat has been really awesome for me. Just being able to go out, clear my head, get some peace and fresh air, and just it's been really good. It's been really enjoyable. So I've enjoyed it. I hope you guys have enjoyed watching me tinker on it and upgrade it. And like I said, still got some things to do. And then obviously we need to get it wrapped. But I'm debating whether or not I want to even fix the dent. That's a lot of work, and it's holding me up from wrapping it, and I really don't even mind the dent, and that's character. I don't know if they'd be willing to wrap over it, or if we should just fix this top rail. I don't know. I've got some things to think about, but I really would like to sooner than later get it wrapped and get it sea-decked, because that'll make it a lot better too. Look cooler and be a good bit more functional. So anyway, more to come on that, but for now, let me know what you think in the comments below. Should we just wrap over it with the dent, airbox stuff? How did you like the riding and the ripping and the noise? I don't know. Just let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. I always love to hear from you guys. But for now, we're out of time, and I'm going to end it here. So thank you for watching. Thanks for subscribing, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.